this week's program. We're going to be talking about animal health. We're also going to be talking about farm accounting and having a look at where drones fit in. But in just a moment, it's irrigation. Tony, you're holding hands with somebody else now.
Yeah, we are. It's been a long gestation. It's something that's been talked about between ourselves and a company called Echolink Research for a number of years. We've done a lot of work together for the last 5 or 6 years. Actually, we have had their staff working for us in the summer. Our staff work for them in the winter. We appear at hearings together when I need certain expertise for certain resource consent work. I second their staff, they second our staff, and it's just it's like, well, why are we doing this as two independent companies? And then of course you've got the good old succession plan, and that lurks in the back of your mind as well, and it's not particularly palatable when you think about what might happen in maybe 4 or 5 years when you pull that roller door down and clip it shut and put a padlock on it, and you try and sell off your assets, and you think, well, actually there's not a lot there.
No, it's actually all above your shoulders, Tony.
That's right. So it's an opportunity to bring another facet of farm services work into hydro services. I mean, what you see is what you're going to get. Hydro services is still out there. I'm still in hydro services, and all those people that are still working for hydro services will still be working for hydro services. Yep. We will just be one company now.
So after several years of dating, you're now getting married. What do they do? I mean, we know what you do.
Yeah, look, they have several branches. They do quite a lot of research work. So they do national good research. So they have research funding. They do a lot of work for territorial authorities, so the regional councils and district councils, that type of work. So they're doing a lot of planning work, especially in the water field. So working out most of the new schemes that have come along, like Ruataniwha and what's being planned in the Wairarapa, then Aqualink have been involved in working out what volumes of water are required on what areas of land, and therefore how much water you've got to store. They've been heavily involved in modelling work, for example, for the Central Plains Water Scheme. So they're right alongside what we're doing. They've got a small farm services group as well, which we will absorb into hydro services effectively. So we'll bring in telemetry and water metering and that sort of stuff, which we don't do.
It's an obvious marriage.
Yeah, it is a very obvious marriage, yeah.
Good. Well, congratulations to you both.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Now, where are we at with spring?
Oh, look, the spring is really panning out as we expected it to. Way back as far as the beginning of June, there were lots of people talking about the fact that El Nino is coming. It's going to strengthen, and we're looking down the barrel at something that's very similar to...
Tell us a wee bit about this graph that I'm holding up.
Well, anything that's red, the red bars on here means that we've got a negative Southern Oscillation Index, which means that we're in the El Nino area. Typically westerly, northwesterly, lots of rain on the west coast, very warm and dry on the east coast. Winters are typically under El Nino. We get a lot of southwesterly type weather, which is exactly what we've had this winter. And now we've reached the equinox period, and suddenly those northwesterly winds come howling in. And we've had a whole sequence of those in the last sort of 3 to 4 weeks. If you think back 3 or 4 weeks, we had an amazing week of 20-degree temperatures in early September. 20 degrees, and everybody's going, whoa. Well, northwesterly, and then we get a little bit of a southerly, southwesterly, which is dry, comes through, a little bit of snow in the mountains, and that's it. And then if you think of what we've had in the last 5 or 6 days, we've had typically El Nino type conditions, very strong westerly winds or northwesterly winds, heaps of rain on the west coast, nothing on the east coast, and quite damaging winds, and even over the weekend, dust everywhere, which is, and if you think back to those years, the 97, 98s, I think 2003, 4, those sorts of seasons, that's what we get, and that's what we're getting. So this could turn out to be a pretty tough irrigating season. Our demand is going to come on very quickly, so we've already started irrigating. We've had to there's lots of people around that are having to, unbelievably, irrigate crops, to irrigate paddocks to actually allow the seed to get through the ground, the plants to emerge, because the very warm weather we've had has crusted the surface. So some of the plants, especially some of the vegetable seeds, spinaches and radishes and those sorts of things, are pretty useless at breaking through. So you've got to moisten that surface up again to allow them to get through. Having to irrigate to get chemical, pre-emergence chemical to work. You know, all these sorts of things are indicators that we're heading down, we're heading down this path, and the weather patterns are certainly suggesting that's where we're going. We're heading down this path.
I mean, anybody who's got dry land farming must be sweating profusely.
Yeah, they will be sweating profusely. If you go into North Otago, for example, they're saying it's as dry as they can ever remember in North Otago.
At this time of year?
At this time of the year. We've only just reached October. So anybody without water in North Otago is not in good shape. North Canterbury is still not out of the woods. They got some reasonable rain 10 days, 12 days ago.
But they're still very
30,
dry.
40, 50 millimetres. Well, it barely touches the surface. You get these winds and we're in trouble.
Please keep us in touch if you would.
Will
Now,
do.
speaking of irrigation, and obviously it's exceedingly important, let's catch up with RX Plastics and what they call G-Set. Phil, set irrigation, you call them G-Sets. They're very programmable.
Yeah, absolutely, and we spent a lot of time getting our control system organised for what is our solid set offering, which is G-Set. And we've got a couple of control systems, one which we've had made in Israel to our specification, and the other one is made in Christchurch to our specification as well. Both of them have very similar components to do the job. So we've got solar panels and batteries, because obviously we want to support the battery as well as we are able. To get it right through a whole season, we need to have that solar panel to assist the battery. And then they've got CPUs or brains in both of the units. So in that regard, they sit independently and they do their job on either a daily basis or every couple of days, or whatever your design criteria is for your irrigation.
So you basically preset them.
Absolutely, yeah. So with the Baccarat controller that we've got from Israel, essentially you set that up at the start of the season, and for example, in a G-Set sense, that might be operating for 30 minutes every day. That might be two 15-minute segments in the morning and afternoon, so wind conditions are dealt with. And that's pretty much the same with the Q-Tech device.
Once they're set up for, I guess, whatever season, you can change them if we hit a whole lot of wet weather or becomes very, very dry?
Yeah, with the Baccarat controller, because it can only take human intervention, you need to actually walk up to every device and change the program if you needed to. Generally, you've set up the irrigation for the worst case, and generally in a season sense. In the Q-Tech, however, we have gone that extra step, and we've got the ability to communicate with that wirelessly. And what that means is that we can take a device, we can update in the computer the schedule for when we want it to all work, and then we can take a manual device and actually update it without going into the field.
What sort of range does that reach?
Something like about 2 kilometres, although because it operates by a mesh process, it's possible where you have topography against you, so maybe you have hills and then valleys and then other valleys and then hills, where the devices, you can't see all of the devices. The devices will communicate from one to another to actually get the information to the very end.
So I suppose they've got a number or some sort of identification so that you can set them?
Yeah, essentially every one of the Q-Tech devices is unique. So a little bit like your name's Rob, they've got also a descriptor that has as unique.
When do you use either of them?
Generally, it's about how much time you actually want to spend setting it up initially. With a pivot corner like we have in our background here, generally something like about 50 to 70 is about the limit of my intent anyway, in terms of manual programming, before I'd actually want to do it with some more ease in terms of control systems, computer, and actually doing it off a list.
And I suppose hill country, you'd go for the wireless system rather than the set system.
Yeah, certainly in those situations, from a practical sense, if you want to check whether in fact the device is operating, or how its battery state is going, or how actually it's progressing through the season, being able to do that with a handheld device is much easier process in those hill areas than it would be to walk to everyone.
So I guess the nice thing is that you can set them to work at night where there's very little evapotranspiration.
Yeah, what we're able to do in that case is that where GSET might be, for instance, traditionally a 1-day return, we'd make it a 2-day return, and we'd actually organise it so that in fact we've got night irrigation and day irrigation for the same pod. And that means that the climatic conditions that were prevailing yesterday are probably not the ones today, and we've covered off a lot of that evapotranspiration difference by actually having it operating at a different time of the day.
Talking of hill country, how do you get it to go uphill?
Well, that's all about the amount of pressure that you actually deliver into the system. The higher the pressure, obviously, the more elevation you can actually achieve in your property. And being a pipe manufacturer, we know that in fact we can manufacture polyethylene up to 25 bar, which is 250 metres of elevation.
So coming back to the programming, I guess that you can program the unit to whatever pressure?
Absolutely. Generally the pressures in a system are actually set by pressure reducing valves on the ring main. We tend to set that early on in the design. Operating pressure for the GSET, somewhere around 4 bar is about ideal, although it will operate at slightly less than that. And we will put pressure reducing valves on the ring mains so that in fact they're all operating at about the best position.
For those who have got posts in place and they've got the set on a post, you've got a bit of magic that you can attach to that as well?
Yes, absolutely, because the principle's very much the same in terms of operation. So long as we're able to install a latch solenoid on the valve that exists, it's possible to use either the Baccarat or the QTEC device. And in fact in QTEC we've added into that a special post unit which clamps on the post, connects into the solenoid, and off you go in exactly the same way as GSET.
And as we said, it's going to be a very, very important irrigation season. But after the break, it's going to be animal health.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website ontheland.co.nz.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Nick, looking at parasite control but not relying on drenches?
Yes, I mean, we're lucky in the last few years that we've all of a sudden had a couple of new molecules, new drench families come to the fore, but before that it was a veritable desert really. We had about 20 odd years with no new drench families there at all, and it looked pretty bleak when it came to resistance issues. And I guess the issue to the forefront for my thinking these days anyway is using drenches responsibly and not becoming over reliant on them, as I feel that we were a couple of decades ago, and probably was very instrumental in creating the problems that developed with resistance to various groups of parasites.
Can we look at breeding? Like, I mean, they're getting rid of foot rot through Lincoln's research.
Absolutely. Well, everyone probably involved in the rural sector will remember quite clearly 10 to 15 years ago the big all the big noise made about breeding for resistance, whereby groups of animals were bred to resist heavy parasite challenge and actually minimise the level of infection, if you like, that these animals sustained. There were two major problems involved with that. One is there seemed to be some genetic traits which were very closely linked to resistance traits, and they weren't very conducive to good production systems. So in other words, by breeding for resistance we lost production gain in other areas. And the other problem was a lot of resistance involved very, very good immune response towards the parasite populations, and there's an inherent cost to the animal when an immune system is triggered. There's a lot of protein lost, and so perhaps in recent times the buzzword for genetic influence in alleviating parasite challenge is a word called resilience. And so now the exciting thing in the fore is breeding animals that are resilient to infection. In other words, they still sustain quite notable infection levels, but the effects on their production is minimal. And so the problems with losing a lot of protein on mounting an immune response aren't there, and so we end up both with animals that can maintain good levels of production and show very little ill effects of quite a heavy parasite burden. So these are the things that are coming up to the fore, and these are the sort of genetic areas where perhaps farmers may be more interested in looking these days.
How important is it to keep a fecal egg count up?
Well, that's the good old tried and true method, is only using drenches when they're required, and so there is some inherent level of immunity that develops, especially in adult animals. And so when you're looking at using drug therapy or drenches, just simply monitoring fecal egg output, especially in sheep, can go a long way to minimise drench use when it's not needed. And that's particularly important, I feel, also in horses. So any people involved in bloodstock should maybe take a leaf out of the old farmer's book these days as well, and perhaps not go over-reliant on drench use without first monitoring fecal egg counts.
What about this in refugia?
In refugia is a very important concept. And it involves diluting out the proportion of a population of parasites which potentially is resistant to drugs or drenches. And the importance of understanding this is knowing that the majority of a parasite population is present on pasture. And so the hallmark of using in refugia involves taking a proportion of animals that seem to be coping with parasite infestation relatively well and leaving them undrenched so that they will shed parasite eggs and larvae around the pasture that haven't been subjected to drench use, and so hence there's been no selection pressure on that population of parasites to make a high proportion of that egg output or larval output resistant to the drug concerned. And so if a population hasn't been exposed to a drug, well then there's very little need for there to be resistance pressure or pressure to develop resistance in that population. By leaving a proportion of those animals undrenched, they're going to shed lots and lots of eggs and larvae, and hopefully the theory is that a big proportion of their output is going to be totally sensitive to drugs when and if they're needed. The experimental work certainly does seem to back up the theory. So another little concept to be thinking about is perhaps relying on animals that are looking okay and actually leaving them undrenched in a proportion of a population. Perhaps some well-doing lambs that have low DAG scores, maybe don't drench those, and that way we can maintain a good proportion of the environmental contamination, still going to be sensitive to the drugs when we need them.
Because we need to be sustainable as well, don't we?
Absolutely, yeah. So, and all of these concepts are involved in sustainable drench use. Using other species, cross-grazing areas of land. It's well known to most people, I think, these days that sheep parasites, internal parasites, affect sheep. They don't tend to affect cattle and vice versa. And so using cross-species grazing to vacuum up, if you like,
exactly,
contaminated pasture is another good way to minimise the requirement of drenches.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. And don't forget, you can see Nick's interview on our website, and just look under animal welfare. In a moment though, it's farm accounting. Kerry, I'm going to call it a drought, and it's already biting. People are making some pretty serious moves.
Yeah, there's a lot of big decisions out there. I've got one farmer who's actually locked the farm gate, sold all the stock, and he's out looking for a full-time job. I've got people coming the next couple of months that want to sort of look at budgets and whether it's going to be, worthwhile for them to keep farming or not. We've got two that are looking at putting the properties on the market. They've just had enough of the conditions.
It'd be sad though, wouldn't it? Because we're at the bottom of the market for the capital gain after all those years of heartache and hard work.
And they realise that, but they said, well, how long do you keep going? How long do you keep putting the money into it to hope do you make it back in the future? Unfortunately, one of them is the 4th generation farm, but they said, there's no point carrying on if we're not going to make the money. You can't keep having losses.
Well, you can't. No, you can't. You can't keep making losses. So, anyway, on a brighter note, let's talk about GST tax invoices. Was that a brighter note or not?
It's just a bit of a warning for people out there, especially if they're a company or a trust, that if you get a tax invoice, it must be in the name of that company or the trust if you want to claim it for GST. IRD is starting to sort of clamp down on this a bit, and they're starting to sort of say, well, if it's not in the name of the company or the trust, then you can't claim it, and if you do, we're going to hit you with penalties because you overclaimed. So it's important that you do that.
So just to reiterate, if it has to be, if you're running a company or a trust, it can't be under Kerry Adams. No, it's got to be under the,
it's got to be under
Adams
actual
Family Trust.
Yeah, the actual trust name or the company name. It can't be in a director, shareholder name, employee name, or anything like that, because it doesn't meet the valid claim for tax invoices. So that's very important for those that are over $1,000, because that's the ones that IRD really clamped down on.
Yeah, okay.
If you've got invoices sort of between 50 and 1,000, you've got some simplified requirements, but really you still meet the same rules. You've got to make sure it's in that entity's name.
And so that means you don't pay anything in cash either.
Well, no, you shouldn't. Not if you want to claim the GST part of it.
I shouldn't have mentioned cash to an accountant.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a grey area for a lot of business, but if you are buying anything, you've just got to make sure you get that invoice. And one of the big issues we're seeing out there now that IRD are looking at is if you go to somewhere and they give you a till tape or an FPOS receipt, people think, oh, that's valid for me to claim the GST because it's got the GST number on it. If it's over $50, then that's not even going to come close, and you just can't claim it. So if one of your suppliers says, look, here's a EFTPOS receipt, and it's over $50, you can claim
But it shows
GST.
up on your bank account.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
You've still got to have that actual invoice if it's over $50.
Good thinking. Now, how are we getting on with the 90-day trials?
There's a lot more of them out there now, and there's a few tips that we just want to share with people because people are starting to get in trouble, and the courts are actually coming out and giving more clarification. So one of the first things is to make sure that you actually seek professional advice before you start using the clause in your employment agreements. If they're not worded right, then they could be actually invalid. So the tip is to actually go and talk to your accountant or lawyer, get it drafted up.
I guess.
Yeah, get it drafted right, and then at least you've got that as your first protection. But a lot of people also rely on it as their sort of part of their recruitment process. They'll take someone on, if they're no good, I'll just get rid of them under the 90 days. It's not what it's designed for. It's actually designed as sort of a last resort. So,
do you know whether we have to give them warnings, or can you just say, look, I'm not going to renew it?
Yeah, it depends on what you've put down. So, for example, if you've said to an employee when you take them on, you're subject to the 90 days, they've agreed to it, and you said you're going to give them formal training, and you don't, and then you put them off, they've got cause to actually come after you because you've breached what you said you'd do for them. So it's not just as simple as saying, right, in 90 days I don't want you or anything like that. You've got to look at what you're actually agreeing to as well. So,
is the 90 days an automatic thing, or do you have to discuss it before pen to paper?
Yep, you've got to just be upfront with it and tell you the potential employee that I'm going to put you on a 90-day trial. They've got to actually agree to it, but before they agree to it, you've got to give them time to go away and talk to people and do their own research on it. If you don't, then you've breached your faith duty to them, and they've automatically got rights to challenge you.
Yeah, it's not because a lot of people will just say, "Hey, listen, it's 90 days," and that will get us through calving.
Exactly. Yes, that's why it's sort of popping up. So if you are going to put them on it, you really need to give them sort of 7 to 10 days for them to go away and look at it before they start working on the farm. So you can't have someone come in today, put an offer in front of them and say, right, here it is, they've got a 90-day trial, and then for them to say, oh, well, I've got no choice, I've got to do it. You've got to give them an opportunity.
Yeah, so it is actually a minefield.
Yeah, it is. And one of the other tricks that we're seeing people do is actually look at promotions of staff. So they've changed them, say, from a farm worker to the farm manager, and they think by doing that, oh, we can put them on a 90-day trial. That doesn't work because they're still the same employee.
Gary, talk to your accountant and your lawyer. Straight after the break, we'll be talking cropping with Dennis Carter.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website, ontheland.co.nz.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Dennis, Chris Orion about sort of coming to the party?
Well, they are, Rob, and it's amazing what a little bit of competition does. The Central Canterbury Plains boys, who have their own wells, or had their own wells with their own electric pumps, of course, and motors, the ones who are participating in the scheme are now having high pressure water delivered to their farm gate. And so there's a bit of competition going on about who's going to use power or not use power. And so, as I understand it, their capacity charges have been halved, so that they're encouraged to turn their electric system on. So for the rest of us poor people outside the Central Canterbury Plains, we're going to continue to pay the full capacity charges based on the size of our electric motors.
So it's nice of you to subsidise the Central Plains side, isn't it?
Absolutely. I just hope they don't turn around and look to recoup some of the charges they've given away up there with the rest of us. So yes, what's good for the goose should be good for the gander.
Yeah,
But it won't happen.
No.
It won't. Nice idea.
Exactly. And of course it's spring, so therefore AMP shows?
Yes, Rob. Well, the Ellesmere show at Leaston kicks off on the 17th of October, and it's one of the first and one of the biggest one-day shows, as a lot of Christchurch people know. It's always great with the blossom and the first to get out there with the fresh grass, the mown grass, and smell it. And this year the theme is soil, water and light, so that's very agricultural. So
yeah, I hope you get enough water to talk about out there.
Yes, well, it'll be okay up until the 17th. It gets a bit dry out there at the showgrounds. It's not the greatest of soil, but there'll be something for everybody, and of course the wearable arts will reflect the theme of the show as well.
Ryegrass.
Yes, October basically is ryegrass month. There's all sorts of things that need to happen. Some of that final grazing needs to be done, and the essence is to have a very even stand, so either grazed hard and then shut up, or mowed for silage if it's an annual and you don't mow too low. Get that done. There's also the weed spraying, there's the nitrogen, there's the heavy rolling, and monitoring for the application of plant growth regulators. So October really is ryegrass month.
And of course it's the same month that everything starts to happen.
Well, it does, and I would encourage farmers to get out there and to monitor their crops weekly, if not twice weekly at the moment, because things are changing so quickly, and to stay in tune with the season. And just hearing a few things about water and irrigation, it's all going to get a bit scary quite quickly, and we'll need some. We've had the dry southerlies, we're having the hot, dry nor'westers. All of a sudden we go from plenty of moisture, plenty of growth, to too dry. So don't get caught. I think that the essence this year would be to start early and just keep on plugging.
Okay, now of course we're also heading towards Porina and grass crop.
Yes, well, with the irrigation and with the cover that farmers have to grow for the biomass for things like wheat and barley and ryegrass, they create a lovely environment for grass scrub and porina to live in and to lay their eggs and to survive in. And it's the sunlight, and if you're in a parched drought situation,
North Canterbury
probably won't be bad, because the eggs of the grass scrub and the porina that are laid will be fried up in the sun, and the ground will be that hard that the grass scrub can't burrow into the ground to lay their eggs. So the opposite, of course, for irrigated country. And so
it's almost interesting, because it's as though nature lets the population expand when there's food, but it won't let it do anything when there's not.
Yes, of course, and then you throw on top of that the cunning old 2-year life cycle grass scrub. Well, he's adapted to survive over 2 different seasons, so he's a little more adaptable, but luckily there's not too many of them about.
Aphids?
Yes, aphids are due to be back, and when I say due to be back, it seems to be that it's a seasonal thing. They come back within a period of about a maximum of 2 weeks difference each year. They've been slow this year because of the wind and the rain that we have had, and wind and rain is more damaging to aphid populations than snow and frost. So people don't realise that, and yeah, the aphid have been slow to come, but look at those monitor plants. Look at sow thistle, prairie grass, the roses.
Yep.
Yep, they're the monitor ones to look at first, and of course there's a lot of overwintered eggs on some crops that you can do something about before the actual eggs hatch. You can actually put some chemical on and some oil on and various things to stop those eggs from hatching.
But don't miss out on any sprays if you've got them scheduled.
Yes, indeed. Look at things that need doing and get on with them. Don't muck around. The winds are blowing. Not every day is a spray day. And you know, I know some spray contractors in the past who have been bugged by bad weather. Farmers ring them up and say, you know, when are you coming? When are you coming? And one clever spray contractor I know said, I'll be there in 14 spray days.
That's very clever, because literally, I mean, a nor'wester, you're just going to lose the lot.
Yes, well, you know, you can start at daylight or you can spray in dark, but usually sort of mid-morning the winds get up in Canterbury and you're shot. So, yeah, think about not how many days to that job, how many spray days.
How many spray days and spray mornings. Thanks very much, Dennis. Now, the interesting thing is that drones are now becoming a major part of everything we do, and this is going to be something exceedingly different. Yeah, we've got more about those very shortly. Technology and farming now going hand in hand.
Certainly, I think there's more and more technology being deployed on farms right across across New Zealand, both in sort of dairy industry, where we hear about robotic milking machines being deployed, but also in some of our arable farms, deployed to help plant crops in straight lines and to harvest them with driverless tractors and on auto steer.
I guess also the latest consent for farmers and irrigation plants, that's all part of it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that precision agriculture aims to help with is environmental performance. So if you can to monitor the amount of water that you're putting on, you can control your irrigation through variable rate irrigation, and you've got monitoring of the runoff and things like that, then you know, technology is a vital part of all of that chain.
I guess we've come a long way since the old early GPS.
Yeah, I mean, GPS has been used for a number of years with things like TrackMap, where you can drive up and down your field and help plant things. But you know, people like Trimble and Caterpillar have got partnerships where they're using that in the roading industry to get millimetre precision for the new roads that they're building. You know, we'll see that sort of technology transferring across into farms, and of course GPS is a big part of UAVs, drones in use, because if you want them to fly an automatic route, then they need to know where they are. So GPS is being used in a huge range of ways, some of which we don't see sort of straight off, but it's there everywhere.
Tell me about drones, because they're starting to come into vogue.
Yeah, so we've got sort of two main types of drones. The most common ones that people see around are these multi-rotor copters, so quadcopters often, and they're quite easy to get hold of, and you know, can fly for about 20 minutes and can be used to run and have a look at a whole range of things. Normally got a couple of video cameras mounted on them. People have been using them for checking water troughs, tracking troublesome weed patches. Maybe some more advanced users use them to count the flock or keep an eye on things.
So you can actually go around the sheep and see if there's any casts while you're having a barbecue.
Yeah, you could, you know, beer and a barbie over at the farmhouse, and you know, someone can be checking up on the sheep, on the flock, make sure that they're not escaping out the gate, or did I shut that gate on the way back through? You know, you can just go and have a quick check. But we're also doing some work with fixed wing drones, so look more like a traditional aeroplane. They can sometimes fly for a bit longer, fly a bit higher. And one of the things that we're using those for is to do some remote imagery. So we might be able to survey a larger area to get an idea of the lay of the land, maybe start to look at how much biomass is available for sheep and beef farmers in the high country. So the fixed wing platform gives us an option for broader areas, and you know, the multi-rotors are useful for smaller areas, or those specific tasks where someone's, you can take it out on the ute and then fly over the next hill, see what's coming up, and so a lot of different possibilities. It's not just one piece of technology.
Are farmers embracing this technology?
I think like all technologies, you've got those who are the early adopting pioneers, and you've got those who will say, let's just wait and see how this goes, and some of those people who will say, that's not for me. So, some people will be right in there. Gardines down in Southland are a great example. Of course, in the South Island Farmer of the Year, Mark there showing off what they're using their drone for. Great use of that technology, and it's delivering real savings for them. Other people will probably take a little bit more convincing, but I can see that they will be spreading throughout the industry.
Now, you're working with the Lincoln Sheep unit.
Yeah, so we've got a range of projects across sort of different sectors in the agricultural industry, and one of the new projects that we've got is working with Lincoln Sheep, using image processing techniques to start looking at, can we help determine body composition analysis without having to do CT scans, or without having to sort of feel and make an estimate. So can we monitor sheep over time and look at how their body shape changes, and help to give better performance predictors for the people.
And all this technology and all the work you're doing, it's all going to come out into the public shortly?
Yeah, we've got a student who's just really starting to get into that, so over the next few years that'll all be coming out. Lots of work to do on trying a few different technologies out, and of course the technology is always evolving, so lots of new exciting possibilities just around the corner as well.
Brent, there's a few sabres being rattled at the moment about overseas buyers in China.
Yes, I think probably the most significant one for the farming perspective is Silver Fern Farms, and their idea at the moment, concept at the moment, that the Chinese will buy 50% of them. I think the price is particularly good. I was very pleased to see that they valued it 250 million for half of it, so put the company at 500 million, which I think is about right. It's an awful lot better idea than the idea which was floated about 10 years ago for a stock and station company to form a joint venture with Silver Fern Farms to have a pasture to plate concept. That just was so naff that it was unbelievable.
Yeah, well, it sort of trembled, but it didn't even get off the
The real scary part about it was the farmers actually voted for it. Somehow the numbers came up that 69% or 70% actually voted in favour of it. And I spoke to quite a few farmers, and they said, well, I said, you're clutching at straws, you're supposed to be the only ones we've got. And I said, well, I don't really think so. But fortunately, thankfully, the banks turned them down. And it was the biggest saviour. I think it's the best thing the banks ever did for the New Zealand farming industry. As I said, this idea is completely crazy. It's just not going to add value to anyone. But this concept of forming an alliance, there's so many things that are positive for it. Yes, in an ideal world, the cooperative would continue to be owned by the farmers, and they'd have had no debt to the banks, and there would be no trade barriers, and TPP or TTP, whatever it was, should not have been a problem anyway, because there would be no barriers to trade anywhere. That is the ideal world, but that's not going to happen.
In an ideal world.
That's not going to happen. And not many countries followed New Zealand's example of doing away with subsidies anyway, farming subsidies anyway. So, getting back to the Silver Fern Farm thing, you have an ability to take out your debt and replace it with a shareholding. People will want a return on their money, so there's no doubt about that either. But it opens the doors to massive markets. Now, we've got to realise that and PPCs, or Silver Fern Farms, are big in sheep meats, and China's got the biggest sheep flock in the world. So it makes, and obviously they eat it all because they're not big exporters. I think they export about 5,000 tonnes out of the amount of money they have. They've got 225 million sheep, which is far bigger than anywhere else in the world put together. So from a product mix point of view, it is really, really good, and they can sort of move them right through seamlessly, right through the chain of business over there. And the Chinese have been in business for a long, long time, and there is nothing better than having people distributing your product who know the language, know the distribution, know the market completely. And so from that side of the coin, Silverfern Farms have done a very, very good deal to align themselves with a very, very, very major player in food. And it's only a 50% stake. It's not a 51% stake. It's a 50% stake, which still at least nominally gives the local board directors equal say in what's going to happen, which is good to see. It doesn't solve some of the underlying problems of the meat industry. There's too many plants, they're not appropriately placed around the countryside. But the alternative for that, where we're going to have a Fonterra type system for the meat industry, where the two companies are going to cuddle up together and we're going to have one marketing chain, that was even naffer than the first idea. So, you know,
yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
No, that was serious lunatic stuff. And it just wasn't going to work. You know, but at the time, the dairy industry, Fonterra, had been going very, very well, and said, well, why haven't we got a red meat industry doing what the dairy industry is doing through Fonterra? Well, slightly different products.
Yeah,
Fonterra dealing with a product that has to be processed within 24 hours. End of question. Otherwise it goes off, they have to throw it away. So you have to have the appropriate plants, and you have to have a very organised structure, whether it be them, Westland or Tatua. You have to have a very regular system to handle the product coming through. Meat companies are not like that. It rains, farmers say, oh no, I'll put some more weight on those lambs. Suddenly goes dry, they all want to kill their lambs. And so you get this waves of product going through, and the meat companies, to their defence, have to look after that. Mm. And so it's a very, very different situation altogether. So that's why the all-in, you know, all things to everyone cooperative was just never going to work. They were just brainless. I think we could have gone down the line of the wine industry as a model for the meat industry. I think that would have been very successful. But that probably won't happen now either, because of if this deal goes together between Silverfern Farms and the Chinese.
Brent, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
And after the break, we're going to shift from meat to wool.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
It's all looking good. Did you bring the sauce? I can't think of everything.
Think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website, ontheland.co.nz.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things. Make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
John, it's pretty good news at the moment for wool.
Yeah, it's been quite a solid start to the season. Where are we? Early October. Benefit of tight supply scenario and of course a low dollar scenario. And when you put those together with demand that we've experienced, the wool price has held up very well, especially for stronger wools and mid-micron wools. So it's been a positive start, and I think I hear that farmers are reasonably happy with their wool price at the moment when you think where it's been in the past. So yeah, it's positive. It is a positive start.
It's nice for us to be able to say it's no longer a byproduct.
Well, we say that, Rob. You know, you're right. You know, and so it's interesting to see where it will play out. You know, as we get further into the season, the higher volumes will come on probably from late November onwards, and you have that pressure time through till probably April, especially for stronger wools. You know, your microns 37 and coarser. So we'll see how it all pans out, but certainly it's been a positive start to the season this year.
Is dust going to be a problem? We've been talking all day about the drought and the dry and the...
Well, it affects yields. That's the biggest, the one that I would immediately come to my mind, yields, and obviously for scouring, affects scouring efficiency, etc., being a machinery man, but that's the biggest factor as far as the farmer's concerned, is actually his yields. If, you know, heavier fleece, less wool, you know. So.
And there shouldn't be too many breaks, with all due respect, because it's been bad all the way through, hasn't it?
Yeah, true.
So
true.
that'll be good.
Yeah.
China, you've just been
China,
there.
yeah, always interesting. Go there. The economy's slowing down, as we all read in the papers, definitely. But they still are using a lot of wool. And if you look back to last season, they took something like nearly 60% of the New Zealand clip, between 55 and 60. And I would say to you that this coming season, it may be 50% or 50 to 55, but they're still a very large user of New Zealand wool. Very interesting to look at actually the types that they've been strong at of late. They have been very strong on these short, fine crossbred types like 30, especially 31 through to 35 micron, and you've seen some real price hikes in the market reflecting that demand, and those wools are substituting into Shetland yarns, double-faced fur fabrics. There's been a very strong demand, and the price levels that have been attained here have been very good for the growers.
I mean, I don't know much about China, but I understand that some of their mills are just mind-blowingly big.
Oh, huge and modern. You know, they've invested heavily in technology. They've, you know, got the best plant, some of the best plant you've seen in the world now, and very efficient. And that mindset of, you know, 20, 25 years ago is gone. You know, and invariably a lot of the mills have European, you know, they've imported the knowledge, and no, very impressive.
John, they wouldn't invest that sort of money if they didn't have a big future for wool.
Well, it's a wool marketplace, and you know, it's a huge marketplace. You know, we know the population of China, and a lot of that product is increasingly staying within China. So as the populace increase, you know, as their disposable income increases, they're spending more and more on higher value product, which means wool. And I suppose it's because a climatical thing. They've always been wool minded, the Chinese, always, and that remains in place. So the marketplace is changing, but it's all very positive for wool.
My understanding is that they've got a huge flock themselves.
They do have a huge carpet flock themselves, which they blend back with New Zealand wool and other origins, but they still need it. They still need our wool. Yeah.
So basically, that's still always going to be one of our major markets.
No question. No question. Whatever patterns change or whatever, they'll still be a very dominant force for New Zealand. And as I said, less export. I think more wool staying within China now, and that's a positive thing. You know, it's a 1.34 billion people, for God's sake, and if the demand pattern keeps changing within the country, it can only be good for wool.
John, thank you very much indeed. That interview with John, and of course all the other ones on the program, you can catch on our website, which is ontheland.co.nz. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed the program, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.